Let's dig in right away with Euro Pacific Capital's Peter Schiff and Nataline Securities Global Fixed Income Head Andy Brenner. Andy, I will go to you first. Your gut reaction of the most important issue here.
The most important issue, I think, is the fact that he's focusing on credit. He's already seen the senior loan survey that's going to officially come out Monday, and I think it's going to be ugly, similar to what the ECB survey was yesterday. So he knows that things are really looking bad in the regional bank space, and I think that's something he's very much concerned about. And yes, I do think the Fed is paused for now.
Okay, maybe we can put up some regional banks, because I think what you're seeing is a problematic behavior here. What was it that he said? Because one of the things he said, and I kind of was a little shocked by this. I mean, I get it from Mary Daly of the San Francisco Fed, who said, oh, there's really, we've stabilized the situation. But he specifically said the banking system is sound and resilient and strong.
Liz, I've heard so many times since the first of Silicon Valley Bank, the banking system is fine. The banking system is stable. And then when we heard on Monday, First Republic has been bought by J.P. Morgan, then look what happened yesterday. I mean, you had some of the banks, PacWest down 25%, Western Alliance down 20%, the KBW index down 7, 8, 9%. Liz, it's not over by a long shot. When you have Treasury bills yielding 5.20 and banks paying 1%, and the ease that this is the thing that Powell said he didn't understand. And what he doesn't understand, because he didn't mention it, is how easy it is to move money out of banks into markets right now. It's never been the case, and they have to factor that in, and it's going to continue to be a problem.
Peter, interpret why you believe the Fed tightened rates 25 basis points this time.
Well, because that's exactly what the market expected them to do, and that's what the Fed does, what the markets expect. But it's not going to do anything regarding bringing inflation down. The elephant in the room with respect to inflation is the fiscal policy. It's the debt, not the ceiling, but the fact that we're running these massive deficits. And until the federal government reduces spending, these quarter-point increases are going to be completely ineffective. And the problem is Powell refuses to call Congress out and mention that the driving force behind all the inflation that they've been creating is reckless government spending. And as long as the government keeps spending, inflation is going to get worse, and so is the current financial crisis. And nobody wants to admit we're in a financial crisis. It is worse than the one we had in 2008. It's just getting started. Ultimately, the Fed is going to cut, but it's going to cut as inflation is accelerating.
Okay, you just brought up the elephant in the room. Let me bring up the canary in the coal mine, because when he was asked specifically, and I don't mean to really hammer the regional bank issue here, but this is significant, folks. He brought this up because he was asked, and he talked about how in the past his focus had been the labor markets and pricing pressures, et cetera, maybe even wage inflation, kind of pushed that to the side. And here's what he said about the near future and what he's looking at. Listen.
I think a particular focus for us going now over the past 6-7 weeks now and going forward is going to be what's happening with credit tightening. Are small and medium-sized banks tightening credit standards, and is that having an effect on loans, on lending? And so we can begin to assess how that fits in with monetary policy. That'll be an important thing.
Peter, if it has an effect, let us be clear. And I know you have said specifically that everything that was built, meaning every investment that was built on a foundation of 0% interest rates, which we had for very long, will crash. Can you be specific about exactly what?
Well, one thing in particular are the banks. I warned for years that the banks would start collapsing for the precise reason that they're collapsing now. The Fed kept interest rates at zero for so long. That's what allowed these financial institutions to load up on overpriced, low-yielding treasuries, mortgage-backed securities, and other loans, plus U.S. government auditors from the Fed, FDIC. They encouraged the banks to buy these long-term treasuries and mortgage-backed securities because they gave favorable accounting treatment. The banks didn't have to mark them to market as long as they could pretend they would hold them to maturity. So the entire house of cards was erected by the Fed and the U.S. government. And now it's collapsing, and they're acting like they have nothing to do with it, and they're trying to figure out how to put out a fire that they lit. And, of course, the problem is they're not putting out the fire. They're throwing gasoline on it.
Okay, Andy, as it pertains to that discussion specifically, the reason the Fed has raised interest rates over and over and over now for the 10th time is because they were trying to quell inflation. We get that. However, if you look at the trajectory over the past several months of how inflation has come down, back in June, it was at 9.1%, and then you can see it coming markedly down. I believe we have a bar chart of all of this. And I'm just wondering, from your standpoint, is the inflation horse back in the barn yet? He didn't say yes.
Is the inflation horse back in the barn? A little bit, but I really do believe it is going in the right direction, but it's going to be sticky. I think one of the things he said today is wage inflation does not lead to real inflation. I'm not sure about that, but nonetheless, getting to Peter's point, on banks, there's basically $1.94 trillion of unrealized losses on their books based on a lot of these treasuries and mortgages that they own. That's a problem. And
how many banks are still in trouble? Because USC's Marshall School of Business in Stanford, they did a study. They said 186 banks are in distress right now.
That number I don't know, but I know the Fed looks at 6 or 8. I don't know if that number's expanded. Obviously, PacWest and Western Alliance are part of those too, in my estimation. But, you've taken out a couple. No question, the banking crisis is not over by a long shot. Too many easy alternatives.
Peter, in a word, who's going to feel the move today the most? Is it the banks? But if so, which part of the banking system?
Of course, everybody that has debt is going to feel the pain of rising interest rates. That makes that debt harder to service. And of course, there's a lot of debt that is still low because it hasn't matured yet. A lot of corporations, a lot of people in the real estate market, particularly commercial real estate, borrowed money 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago at really low rates. And the higher rates are, when those loans mature, it's going to be that much harder for them to get the financing to roll them over. And then you have the prospect of very disorderly bankruptcies throughout the economy.
Andy, we just want to quickly look at the 10-year and the 2-year. The 2-year is most sensitive to Fed policy. That one had dropped 5 basis points. Let's see where it is right now. And in doing so, Treasury investors are appearing to shift their positions, moving to the longer dated bonds versus the shorter dated ones.
Liz, they think that the recession is coming. There's no question that this Fed is not believed. Just taking the 2-year for a second, the 2-year is running 115 basis points through Fed funds right now. So that's telling you there's a lot of disbelief out there. The 5-year is somewhere around 3 3/8, 340, give or take. That is telling you that people are investing, that they don't think these yields are going to be here, and that the Fed is going to turn around and start easing, regardless of the fact that they say they won't.
Andy, Peter, thank you so much.